and it's an expensive process, and we have to be
Satisfied in our minds that we do have the evidence to substantiate our decisions, and very often people complain about individuals because of personality differences and so forth, not really getting down to job performance.
I think a lot of the difference is that they're on the inside and he's on the outside. Right here.
Which kind of makes it look bad for us.
Mr.
There
Ringo?
was a question on
The many get the money.
In terms of your personal views, the decisions that you have made, from reading, I know something, I've read both of your names very plainly, and I'm wondering now, making this decision to enter the Bureau of Affairs and work from the inside, is this more, some real hope that Indians can take over the Bureau of Indian Affairs and evolve in parallel with new flowering of the world spirit and American culture, and ultimately reach some really great society where everybody has the best of everything and very little bit of control, pressure, and so on. Those great dreams. Or is the case that what is also, or primarily in your mind, you're hoping that you can make the life of the people just a little bit better for a little while before the inevitable comes.
No, that, yeah.
I'd like to illustrate what I'm speaking about. I think, in a very broad sense, I think what you're talking about too. Right now, the pipeline to Alaska is a very big issue for the banking decision. Or it's strip mining on the Navajo reservation. But focusing down, taking the Navajo reservation, for example, another situation here I haven't heard discussed, and I really might like to know something about, is you mentioned the federal aid to small businesses on Indian reservation, and there's a certain amount of opposition from the tribal enterprise. I stopped on the Navajo reservation this summer and speak to friends, and I saw FedMart, this huge FedMart store. That's tribal enterprise. But I was amazed to see that the gasoline prices on Navajo reservation were 26 cents a gallon. I was buying regular. Oh, that's just absolutely amazing. I expected 48 cents a gallon. I also noted that quite a number of the small traders and gasoline stations that had been stimulated, for instance, by the federal program, were boarded out. If it's the case of the pipeline, for instance, to Alaska, again, we're in the oil aspect of the thing. In the long run, that pipeline's going to go through. Nobody stops some aborigines may be compensated monetarily or at all. But in the long run, it has to go through. It has to do with, tightening of things in the Near East and oil allotments for major oil companies in the United States and a huge growing market. The same thing with the greed and need for power in Los Angeles. So you got strip mines, the reservation, isn't there? And the government statement recently, we get
The Interior Department. Yeah.
there's going to be
It's necessary.
we need more space to expand. And
Yes.
where do we expand? We expand the Indian reservation. Isn't that coming? Is there any way that can be stopped in the long run?
Well, I think, in my own opinion, the only way it can be stopped is by the American public supporting the positions that Indian tribes take with regard to these issues. That's the only way, because as a political force in this country, Indians, they don't wield nothing. They're zero.
Even
And,
Muskies
and, and
by
the
now.
only, Well, we hope so.
Let me give you an example. I'll insert this right here. Muskie was asked last week if he would like to have an American Indians for Muskie campaign formed for him, and they said that they weren't really interested. As an example of the Indian clout, political clout, and that they didn't know if they could fit that into their situation right now. So that to me was the kind of indication of just how much they want the Indian vote.
I think what you're describing here is a reality of life. However we may feel about it, we know that in this country we have a system, and it affords all of us an opportunity to select our leaders and so forth. And it's only through these means that we can control those kinds of things. As an individual Indian, I really don't look for support from congressmen, senators, and so forth, from any of these states that have Indian reservations located within their states. Because what they see is if they support the Indians' wishes, they're not supporting the wishes of the constituency, which is non-Indian, which usually is larger than the Indian population within those states. And in my opinion, the only way you can get things done for Indians is by getting the support of the congressmen and senators east of the Mississippi, where there's no conflict of this sort. And also getting the support of the American public. The enactment of the 1934 Act, whereby Indians were allowed to have their own constitutions, their own tribal councils, and so forth, wasn't a result of Indians pushing for those things, but was a result of non-Indians getting up on their haunches and supporting and assisting, soliciting funds. And it wasn't done in the states where the Indian reservations are located. It was done on the West Coast. It was done in New York and on the East Coast. This is where it was done. And after the wealthy American public learned about the situation on the reservations, they wanted to assist, so they did, money-wise and otherwise.
No, we're not.
There are 8 or 9 million people in Los Angeles. Is that correct? Something like that?
In the,
Enormous number of people. There's a great industry there. And unless they change their way of life, their lifestyle, and the values of life, they're going to have to continue driving their automobiles and expanding their city. And if they quit running all their air conditioners, maybe when they use much power, where's it going to be drawn from? Well, strip that soft coal off the Navajo reservation, hire 5 or 6 Indians, and the air is already pretty stunning. That's just one big soft coal plant going up there. Well, the interest, what I'm trying to arrive at here is clearly if you're looking for support from those senators east of the Mississippi or west of the Mississippi for the most part, the interest of their constituency as it exists at the present time basically conflicts with the interest of the American Indian and
Right.
the position you're stating.
right.
And this is,
That's why something like almost a religious change, it ain't gonna happen.
well, I think you're describing a very realistic situation, and I think when Indian tribes begin to recognize this, they may begin to plan for 50 years down the road and so forth. But like right now, you're talking about the strip mining on a Navajo reservation. That was cleared with the tribal council and so forth. Sure,
Yeah.
and so, what can the government officials do with regard to, if that's what the tribe wants? You feel that they understand the significance of the project and what's going to happen to their lands, their ecology, and so forth, and they went into it, and how do you stop it?
It's what a lot of people wanted, and lo and behold, it happened. It had a lot to do with some of the original uranium reasons, which became oil and gas reasons, which became coal.
Which the Navajos had monitors on all the way along.
Rick?
I can't understand how the Navajo Tribal Council could sell out for $12.5 million spread out over 10 years, $750 million worth of coal, and all the assorted pollution that went with it. $750 million worth of coal. That's $750 million, $12.5 million.
Is that what the figures are on that?
I don't know, and I don't.
I don't think that
I-
those figures.
I know some of the leadership on the Navajo reservation, and I live very close to this area where they're going to be strip mining. And I know that many of those Navajos are quite sophisticated, they're college educated. And I'm not assuming that, you know, what you're saying is exactly true, because they have attorneys. They're a huge tribe, and they have tribal council representation that I'm sure examine all of these factors. And I'm sure they didn't enter into that contract with the idea of losing money on it. I'm sure they entered that contract with the idea of making money on it. And so, you know, I'm not.
And what about the Hopi? You know, the Hopi in the center, they're surrounded completely by the Navajo. And they depend on, I believe, 3 streams coming between the mesas. Am I correct there?
Yes.
And those 3 streams, if you've ever been around strip mining, those 3 streams are going to be just about as red as that is thick in another few years. Because that's what happens. The iron comes out of the coal and it gets in the streams, and you can't drink that water for years.
I think the point that's been raised has been raised in two instances, is that what kind of advice do the Indian Tribal Councils get from federal agencies in development of programs? And you stated that I'm not going to come to tell a tribal council what to do, but a tribal council doesn't have the expertise nor the resources, and it has to draw from the outside. And I question what kind of resources the BIA or other federal agencies are giving to Indian tribal councils so they make the optimum investment or make the right decision, so they don't, you know, cause this kind of manipulation on the part of the tribe and other things. And I question, you know, what is your role then as being an Indian? Do you foresee that the BIA will come into the defense of these tribal councils, or you refuse to go in because you believe that's being paternalistic?
I think that they will probably come to the defense of Indian tribes, but I think on the other hand, those Indians who advocate Indian involvement and no non-government advice and so forth, or government advice, however you want to put it, I think I have to recognize that, you know, you can't completely operate separately. That one has to reinforce the other. And sure, there's going to be people accusing you of being paternalistic and so forth. But I think there are ways of doing these kinds of things. I think they're being done quite extensively, more than, you know, we would like to see probably. And with the old idea of a management agency rather than a service agency.
Maybe,
You reach a point where if you're telling the tribes too much and you're providing them with too many services, tribal councils and things, somebody's going to come along and say paternalism. It's a delicate balance.
well, I'd like to rely on our experts at the table. And I suspect we're about running to the limit of our discussion here. I would like to. Okay.
There's one other part of your question that you were raising a while ago before you became like a reporter at a presidential press conference and went on and on and on. But by the way, you're very well informed. Hang on. You were asking if I went there with this big rosy picture of the world becoming utopia, and all, or if I would just, and you asked it of him too, or if I were there just to prolong things, to make things better for a little bit longer. Well, I went there to do what I could, and I think it's kind of crassly silly to ask the question ask it of somebody who is trying to do something, if they're just there to prolong things. You know, I don't think that you'd ever get anybody to admit that. Maybe Governor, what's his name in Georgia, who just went out. Maybe he'd say that he's just trying to stall things or something. You know, he would admit it, but I would never say that. I'm not doing that. But I don't see any rosy future for the Indian people in this country. And at the same time, I don't see any rosy future for the non-Indians in this country either. There are rough days ahead, and there are rough days ahead for the American Indians especially. But I do think, though, that there is enough intelligence and enough determination, and I think that it's developing very nicely, I think. We're toward the situation where Indians are going to be able to help themselves. Expertise-wise, on their tribal councils, there will be Indian lawyers, doctors, whatever. Eventually, this will happen, and the picture's getting better. The kids are slowing down on killing themselves and that sort of thing, I think. Really, I didn't say that facetiously. And it's things are beginning to improve. But I think that the picture is so vastly sorry and shattering, if you really see it, that it's going to take a long time, and there's no such thing as a rosy future, because life is rough, and you only get rosy, dreamlike worlds and utopias when you're on pot or something. But they just don't exist in reality. Life is just too harsh for that, and it's always been harsh for the Indians. And if life gets even 25% better, it'll be a hell of a lot better than what it is now. And if I can bring about 25%, I'll do it.
Here's our last question over here.
I'll answer both questions with one. I don't advocate termination.
I don't advocate termination.
Okay, I'd like to do some summary and perhaps make just a slight different tack than some of you who have attacked the Bureau of Indian Affairs so severely, and again admitting I am no specialist in Indian affairs. But I would suggest to you that there is one large, well-organized, and well-financed organization in the United States that has some concern for Indians. I mean one and one only, and that's probably the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And it would seem to me that if you're going to start thinking about what can be done for Indians, and what direction can we go, the most powerful organization to accomplish these goals is the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And the point, it would seem to me, that these gentlemen are making and are contributing to through their endeavors within it is to change its direction so that it can come much more closely to the goals of the Indians themselves rather than the goals as perceived by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It would seem to me then it should be the goal of the Indians and those who are supportive of the Indian groups to seek to support the Bureau of Indian Affairs through these types of people who are seeking these changes. It would seem to me this is the direction we should be going, not to be critical and damning this particular organization, but seeking its change and then providing support to it. Thank you, gentlemen.